Hello, and in this video we are going to be showing you how to set up a basic server with Ubuntu 16.04. This is that's the OS I use for all my servers. This is the guide that I use for all of my servers, kind of the template. The default server installation needs some configuration before it can be appropriate for production use. So that installation might be what you do from a CD, or it might be, just the default version you get from like Linode or DigitalOcean. They'll install it. This is going to be kind of like the post-install instructions, just to get the basics down pat. It's really popular right now to use automation tools like Chef and Ansible. We're going to be doing everything by hand, mostly because it's just an educational video. This is about setting up the server, not about doing any kind of automatic deployment. So this is going to be the way people used to always do it, and what a lot of people still do it, especially if you're a hobbyist. This is the way you generally will be doing it. So the prerequisites are going to be a remote server running Ubuntu 16.04, SSH server on there, and of course you'll need root or sudo access, which should be all that should be set up if you've already installed Ubuntu. So a bit of a warning: if you're doing this on a remote system, you need to be very careful, because if you're messing with SSH and your firewalls, it's very easy to block yourself. Like if you do something that destroys the SSH server and then you disconnect, you won't be able to reconnect, right? Because you broke it. Same thing with the firewall. Well, the firewall will be a little bit different. You could lock yourself out. Like if you blocked all ports, well, you're not going to be able to log in with SSH because all ports are blocked. You're going to have a bad time. Okay, so you see these caps here, the remote server IP. That's just kind of a placeholder for whatever your remote server is. Just reminding you to log in remotely. And then the very first thing, of course, you always want to do is run the apt-get update. That's going to refresh those repository listings you have and see which ones need to be updated. And you can do apt-get upgrade, and that will update all of your software. So any patches or updates need to be applied, that will do that. And then my editor of choice is NANO. Generally, this is always installed by default, but I actually came across a couple of VPS servers that didn't have it installed by default. I think they were doing like an Ubuntu. They're calling it a Ubuntu server, but I think they were actually doing like a full minimal installation, which I think is a little bit different. But anyway, I'm not fancy. I use NANO. If you are comfortable with Vim or Emacs, totally use that. But most people are going to feel a lot more comfortable with NANO until they reach that next level of using those next level editors. So we are going to be creating a user. So you don't want to run always as root, because that's dangerous. You could do something dumb, or it's just dangerous. Don't do it. We're going to create a user. So just as add user and then username. So those usernames in caps, you would replace that with whatever username you actually want to have. Like I would probably use Jason, and then it's going to ask you some questions and get you a password. And then what we want to do is give that user sudo privileges. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to show you step by step on the screen this time, but there will be a link that has like a step by step, so you can kind of copy and paste all these instructions. So this line will give that user you just created the ability to run commands kind of as root. So now that user can go sudo apt-get update, and so you also need to generate some SSH keys. We don't want to be logging in to our remote server using passwords, and so in order to avoid that, we want to generate SSH keys. If you've done this a few times, you may have your own local keys. I would use those, but if you haven't, this is how you do it. You do SSH keygen. That's going to ask you a few questions and generate your key pair. If you don't know about public key encryption, I have some videos about it. YouTube's got a lot of videos about it to get a little more in depth. But basically, there is a public key and a private key. So there's two keys going to be generated. If you're generating the SSH keys, you don't want to leave that passphrase blank, because then if anybody gets that private key, remember I said there's a public and a private key, you're going to be putting your public key on your servers. You're going to keep your, wait, let's go back. You're going to take your public key you're generating, you're going to put that onto your server, and then you're going to keep your private key. That private key then will help you authenticate. So the computer will look at your public key, and then you're going to send a message, and then it's going to be able to determine if that's actually you. So if you don't have a passphrase in that private key, anybody that has possession of it can log into your server. So that's can be a bit of a problem. So On your local machine, you're going to be copying that public SSH key to the remote server with a SSH copy ID. That's the best way to do it. I've seen other tutorials where people do copy and pasting, but then you got to worry about permissions. This will take care of it for you. Once again, all the details are in the blog post below. It'll give you all the details. This is kind of just like I'm just walking you through it so you can have a video to watch. And then we want to test the key. So we're going to try to log into the server as a user. So it's always SSH, username, and then the remote IP. And then we're going to start hardening the SSH server. So very first thing you should do whenever you're editing any of these configuration files, pretty much for anything on Linux, I really recommend before doing anything to make a copy. So make a copy of that SSH configuration file. If you make a copy, then it allows you to go back, right? I have many times done terrible edits to configuration files and then totally killed whatever that service was, and it's kind of something you learn from terrible experience. Okay, so we are going to edit it. We're going to edit that SSH configuration file. So we're going to use NANO to do that. So first thing we're going to do is we are going to set. So in that file, it's going to be a big file. It's going to be a whole bunch of lines of configuration. You're going to try to find these lines and change them to the appropriate values. So we want to find public key authentication. We want to mark that as yes, because we want public key authentication because we just generated them. We copied our public key over to the server. Yeah, we want it. Okay, we want to disable password authentication. So you can, use username and password to log into your server over SSH, but that leaves you vulnerable to brute force attacks. So most of my servers, I use Jason as my username, and somebody can just brute force, just keep on using a whole bunch of passwords until they happen to find one that works. So I just say password authentication no to avoid that, because we're going to use public key authentication. And we also want to disable the root login, because now we gave our user sudo privileges, so root doesn't need to log in. It's a little bit safer that way. And then, of course, we want to reload that SSH server. Fail to ban is a great intrusion prevention tool. What it's going to do is watch those SSH logs. Well, what we're going to use it to do, it can do a whole bunch of things. Usually, what it'll do is it'll watch logs, and then based on certain behavior, it can temporarily ban IPs. So, like in this example, we're installing fail to ban. What we want to do is to watch those SSH logs. And if someone keeps on trying to log in and failing, we want to ban them temporarily. Yeah, because that's going to help stop some of those brute force people. So we're going to, once again, copy that configuration file before we do any editing. And then we want to edit this jail.local file to enable monitoring of SSH. And so we're going to look, it's going to be a whole bunch of stuff. What you really want is these brackets with SSH. And in there, what you want to do is enable true. And then that will do it. And then you restart failed ban, and then it will watch those logs and try to block people that are trying to log in too many times. So now we got the firewall. So your firewall will change as you add new services. This is your basic server setup. So the only thing that needs to access the outside world, or needs to be accessed from the outside world rather, is SSH, right? We're not running a web server on this thing yet. There's no database on here. This is just a blank slate. So as we add things like a web server or like a database maybe, or a file server, as we go, we will add exceptions to the firewall. But right now, the only thing we want to allow is SSH, right? So this is really simple. I have a whole other tutorial that'll be coming out very soon about the UFW, the uncomplicated firewall, but this is a very easy one. So then you just, once you've done your rule, so UFW should be installed by default. If not, it's just going to be your general apt-get sudo install. Sudo. My fingers know how to do it. My mouth doesn't. Sudo apt-get install UFW, and then once that's installed, you would just do the simple allow SSH and then reload the firewall. Another thing that a lot of people forget, and I used to forget this all the time, and I've gotten much better at it, and I'm very proud of it, is naming your server. So generic server names can be really confusing. Sometimes they'll just all be called Ubuntu, or sometimes they'll be called, server. And when you have multiple windows open, it's just very confusing. It's nice to be able to have that prompt where it tells you what that server's name is. So, if you have multiple SSH windows open, you can just look and say, hey, this is the database server, this is the web server, I know where I am. If they're all named the same, it's going to get confusing. And if you go online, people have a lot of ideas about different naming schemes. So some people like name all their servers after trees or flowers. I like transformers. You can do whatever you want. Just have a system and kind of stick to it. If you edit the host name file, then you can just put it in. So like this server, I'm just going to call Seattle just for fun. And then we're going to go into the hosts file and edit that too. And so underneath the local host where it's 127.0.0.1, you're going to add your own. So you got this, and then we're going to add Seattle. So that knows who it is, knows its own name. And then we're going to reboot it. It's because once there's a ways to do it, but rebooting is the best surefire way. And then it will have its new name. Time is another thing that's important. I've been surprised how often my remote servers have the wrong time. It's not really that big. Well, I won't name names, but some providers, I'm not sure what's going on there. So I set my time zone to my local time. So my logs and everything are local time, and I'm here on the west coast of America, the USA. So I'm going to set the time to America, Los Angeles, and then I'm also going to enable the network time protocol. That's maybe the more important one, is that's going to go onto the network, find the timekeeping servers, and try to get the most accurate time as possible. All right, well, that is the basic way of how to set up an Ubuntu server for 16.04. In the links below, I have a detailed blog post that's going to have all the stuff so you can copy and paste and make it all simple. Thank you for watching. If you liked that video, hit that like button. And if you want to see more videos like this, leave me a comment in the comments below. Thank you.